So here's what I think. I feel like this became increasingly clear to me in 2020, but I wish I had noticed it sooner. I personally don't think we can talk about marketing and taking up space to grow our work in the world without understanding privilege and power and how it functions in the marketing space. And so part of that is like simple things like understanding accessibility considerations. But it's also about understanding like how to be sensitive to moments of collective trauma when the world is on fire. Like what kind of space do we take up and how do our identities, particularly our privileged identities, impact the people we're trying to reach, right? And so if we're trying to reach people with our message about our work, because capitalism, but we're doing it in a way that is harmful, furthering oppressive dynamics, furthering white supremacy, racism, transphobia, ableism, etc., then are we really going to make meaningful change in our work? Are we really going to make an impact? Are we really going to connect with people? Or are we just going to like create more of a mess and more harm? So there are lots of different ways we could explore that conversation further, which I do when I teach on the topic, but that's kind of a brief overview of how I approach marketing through a justice and equity lens.
I love that because I feel like for so long, this space was just like, hey, look at all these white, cisgendered, middle-aged, middle-class, married in heterosexual relationships men who have come from the corporate background. You know, they all look like Lewis Howes. And they are, you know, I'm not gonna name drop all of them, but like there's this rags to riches. I worked so hard. I slept on my sister's couch and now I'm a millionaire and you can do it too. And like, well, maybe you did have some hard times, but like you were not up against the same societal oppressive systems that many of us are up against. And I say that as, you know, a cisgendered white woman in a heterosexual relationship. Like I have lots of privilege and I still feel like there are times that the world is against me in some ways, which
totally.
Because that's capitalism.
Totally. That's the nature of being alive at this moment in time.
Exactly.
Like, how do we challenge dominant? I mean, part of the work I do through the marketing justice equity, you know, combination is also understanding that we can use our marketing as platforms to challenge dominant culture. And we can use our marketing in a form of activism. If we like, it's almost like we have to take a step back and think, okay, so maybe it's not about me. Like my work is about me, my marketing is about me, but it's also about the people I'm serving. So how can I be of service to them? And if I'm constantly making it about me, or I'm not thinking about what other people might be experiencing in a particular moment, in particular like political, social context, then how am I actually going to reach them, right? And I think that we kind of like isolate ourselves into bubbles of echo chambers, and particularly when it comes to our privileged identities. And I just think part of the conversation that I want to have about marketing is using our marketing as a way to create meaningful change. Like I think we can grow our work in the world and create culture shift and create more justice and create more equity and focus on more equity.
And be profitable and have businesses that are reaching the right people and support our lives and our families in doing so. Like I came from a nonprofit background, so there's that part of me that's like, you know, money doesn't matter, but then I'm like, well, but I still have a mortgage to pay, right? Like we can do all those things. We can shift culture, we can react against the dominant narratives and still be in a capitalist culture making money without harming people.
Yes. I mean, I think we can do less harm.
Maybe that's what it is. It's not do no harm. It's do less harm.
Yeah, less harm. Exactly. Yeah.
So much for our Hippocratic oath. Thankfully, we don't have to take that as marketers.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we could talk to doctors about this, seriously. I don't think that they can do no harm. I think they can do less harm, for sure.
So true. But the intention is good to do no harm, right?
Yes, yeah.
So what does that actually look like in a practical format? You know, so like for context, when right after right after George Floyd was murdered, I remember having a conversation with my friend Andrea Jones, who is a Black woman in the marketing space. And she was like, I have so many requests for speaking. I don't have time to do them all. Everybody wants me to come into their communities, but nobody's giving me any money for it, you know? And she's like, how do I politely say no? Like, I don't want to give you more free labor because you want to look good in your social media. And hopefully she's okay with me sharing that, because I know it was a very difficult thing for her at the time. But like, how can we amplify the voices of those who have different experiences and hold space for those who have diverse experiences and create these inclusive communities without seeming like we are taking advantage of people, you know?
Yeah, I think the first part, I think, of this answer is it starts with us. Like, it starts with us turning inward and doing our own work to understand how we ourselves are subject to biases, subject to phobias, you know, racism, all the isms. How are we operating from those dominant narratives of power and oppression? How are we upholding them? How are we not recognizing the ways that we are benefiting from certain systems? How are we, like, it's like internal.
Yeah.
When we start to recognize, oh, look, like, white supremacy operates in all of these forms. Yes, like racism is an overt form of white supremacy, but white supremacy is also operating through this culture in which whiteness and everything associated with whiteness is upheld as the norm and the better, right? And through that, it's like urgency and perfectionism. And so what I hear, I mean, among many other characteristics, and I'm not just like making this up out of nowhere, there's lots of research around like what it means to live in a white supremacy culture. And when I think about 2020 and all these folks, particularly Black, Indigenous, and people of color, getting these like last minute hurried requests for speaking engagements, and I myself sometimes get those too as a trans person, particularly around Pride Month or Trans Awareness Week or Trans Day of Visibility. It's like suddenly everybody wants to talk to me, but it's only because of these outward allyship moments.
The Trans Day of Visibility, and then they're going to ignore you the other 364 days of the year.
Like, what are you doing beyond the day, right? And if you're emailing me with a last minute request and you're like, oh, can you put this like social media post together for us so that we look good, you know, on this one day, but they're doing it last minute. They're not offering me compensation. There's a sense of urgency. There's a sense of upholding power. They're just simply inviting me in.
It's like, well, we have the stage, so we're blessing you with it. It's almost like when designers are like, we'll do it for the what's the word? Like for the people to see it, for the visibility. And you're like, no, but that's time that I'm spending on it, you know?